Iran strike turning out to be Donald Trump's big mistake. Even sections of his own base are now criticizing him for dragging America into what is being called Israel's war. The Iran Israel war is now playing out as a classic case of asymmetric warfare. Iran clearly does not have the military capacity to take on either the American or the Israel military, but it does, of course, have the capacity to send missiles and drones into different parts of West Asia. So, in the last few days, we have seen Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, we have seen Dubai, Abu Dhabi, even Oman being pulled into this conflict. In the meantime, Iran has said that 153 girls were killed in the strikes, the coordinated strikes by Israel and the United States. There is no formal response to this claim from either of the two countries yet. The big question now is, does Trump know how to end a war that he has started? Russia today sent a chilling message to the West. Dmitry Medvedev warned that while this was not World War III yet, Medvedev said if Trump continued, unquote, unquote, his insane course to criminally change regimes, this would become World War III. In the midst of all this, the opposition is lashing out at the government. They are accusing the government of putting India in Israel's camp. India's own statements have not taken any sides, but have only expressed deep concern for the situation. Prime Minister Modi has, in fact, in the last few hours, spoken with the leadership of several countries, including the leaders of Iran, Kuwait, Oman, amidst this spiraling crisis. I want to welcome our experts to the program today as we try and understand what's happening and how it might impact us in India. Remember, no part of the world is going to be left unimpacted if this continues to carry on. In Pakistan itself, we have seen now reports emerge that it was US Marines that fired directly at protesters trying to storm the consulate, the American consulate in Karachi. My guest today, I want to welcome General Atta Hasnain, a military veteran, former General Officer Commanding of the 15th Corps. Welcome, sir. I also want to welcome somebody who has spent considerable time in the region that today finds itself at the epicenter of the storm, Ambassador Navdeep Suri. Welcome, sir, to the program. And my colleague and senior journalist, Suhasini Haidar, is with us, the diplomatic affairs editor at The Hindu. Welcome, everybody. Ambassador Suri, let me start with you. This is a region you know well. You know, UAE, countries like the UAE used to position themselves and pride themselves on the fact that they were insulated from the troubles around them. They have been pulled into this. We've seen the sheikhs of Dubai taking a walk in the Dubai Mall today to try and project to the people that all is well, but people are trying to leave Dubai in droves. Is this conflict turning out to be Trump's big mistake, according to you? I can't hear Ambassador Suri. Sir, if you could unmute yourself, please. I can't hear you, sir. I'm so sorry. I can't hear you. Sir, you're muted at your end. While you fix that, let me just put the same question to General Hasnain.
Is that okay now?
Oh, yeah, you're back. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that it was actually Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed who was in that mall, the ruler of Abu Dhabi and the president of UAE.
That's right.
Trying to shore up confidence. Look, it really does put the Emiratis and the other countries in the Gulf in a kind of a no-win situation because on one hand, they do host military bases. You know, the largest U.S. air base in the region is in Qatar. The largest naval headquarters are the 5th Fleet's center in Bahrain. Al Dhafra next to Abu Dhabi hosts U.S. Aircraft and so on. So you know, these countries have kind of depended on U.S. as the protective umbrella for many years. Over the last month, they tried to go out of their way to assure the Iranians that they will not allow their assets, their facilities to be used against Iran, but that hasn't protected them. There is also this angst, which one of the Saudi officials has come out quite strongly, saying that it seems that we are left on our own. The air defense systems that the Americans have are only for the protection of the Americans or the Israelis and not for us. So you see that the options that the Emiratis and the others are weighing are: should we hit back or should we keep absorbing the blows? They do have the capacity to hit back. I think the Emiratis, UAE is generally called the little Sparta because it's got a very strong air force. It's got genuine military capabilities. Some people say next only to Israel in the region. But then if you sit back, what is it that they can hit that the Americans and the Israelis haven't hit already? And do they want to widen the scope, deepen the scope of the war? So I think they're finding themselves in this situation where there are no good choices available. Should they respond to Iran's actions and come together and beseech the Americans that please stop the conflict? And are the Iranians ready for that as well? So as of now, I think the friends that I speak to in UAE, etc., are the ones expressing these dilemmas that they've been put in a situation where they can no longer continue to walk the fine line and maintain that business as usual thing, that we are the oasis of safety and stability in an otherwise turbulent region. I think that facade has really taken a hit.
But if you say there are no good options, but yet they can no longer position themselves as this sort of oasis of insulated oasis, as it were, in the middle of the storm, what do you expect some of these countries to be doing next?
Look, there's been a GCC foreign ministers meeting, and they've come out with a statement saying that we have the right to respond. And I looked very closely at that statement, and I said, yes, you have the right to respond, but who are you going to respond against? What are you going to respond at? And that's why I say that they have no good choices, that they've been dragged into a conflict that was, I think, not of their making. I don't buy into some of those reports that have been saying that the Saudis, for example, were asking for the regime to be taken down. And if I just rewind a little bit, Barkha, when the last nuclear agreement during the Obama administration was signed, the JCPOA, the Gulfies were very unhappy with that because they felt they didn't have a seat on the table. It was negotiated by the P5+1, by the Europeans and the Americans and so on. And it did not take into account their concerns with the Iranians that beyond nuclear, there was also the issue of missiles. There was also the issue of the axis of resistance and intervention in the affairs of these countries, whether it was Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Iraq or others. So there was a genuine angst vis-a-vis Iran. But I think over the last couple of years, we saw that these countries had kind of taken the view that there is no option but to have a modicum of good managing the relationship with Iran. You saw the embassies being restored. You saw the Saudi-Iran agreement. You saw a general lowering of tensions. And now this is all back on the table to haunt them.
So, General Hussain, the Israelis that we've been interviewing in the last few days, they're arguing that this is, in fact, if this is a war of narratives, this is, in fact, to the advantage of America and Israel, because countries that may have not wanted this war, now that they have come under attack, they are not going to be as level-headed about Iran. But it can also be argued the other way. And what can be argued is what is most important for the leaderships of these countries is to maintain commerce, tourism, trade, stability in their own countries. This is the war that they will want to see end sooner rather than later. The point is, Trump, having declared regime change as the stated goal, the killing of Khamenei has not achieved that, which is what most experts had pointed out. So what next? General Hassan, could you unmute yourself, sir, please? Yeah.
It's quite obvious, Barkha, that Mr. Trump is obsessed only with American and Israeli interests. Ambassador Deep has just brought out what exactly are in terms of what the Gulf nations themselves would want. They wouldn't want to get stuck in this particular war at all. But I don't foresee Mr. Trump stopping. This is the fourth day that we are on at the moment, and 750 people are so far reported to have died. This is a Gaza being repeated. How many times people spoke to Israel, spoke to America to stop the bombing of Gaza until 75,000 people died, no one stopped. Right? So I don't foresee this. You see, we are looking at extremes here. This can stop tomorrow. This can stop tomorrow if Iran just hypothetically steps forward and says, okay, we are willing to negotiate, it can stop. But I don't think that will happen. Or it can just continue over the next 3 to 4 weeks, and we can see extreme situations. Why 3 to 4 weeks? Even beyond that. That will be the worst case scenario, which the Russians are themselves predicting at the moment. As far as the Gulf nations are concerned, they are short of any options at all. While you say that they would love to have normalcy in their tourism and things like that, I think the situation is just too much in against them at the moment, given the considered security environment of the entire West Asian region. I don't think normalcy is going to be there for quite some time. So this fog of war and this gray zone situation is going to last out, whether we like it or not.
Well, if that's the case and you don't see Trump stopping anytime soon, how do you interpret Medvedev's statement, Dmitry Medvedev saying very clearly on a Russian television program that if this continues, and he described it as Trump's insane course to criminally change regimes, then this will become World War III. Now, I'm not saying that has to be taken literally, but Russia is clearly warning here of a global footprint to this conflict.
There's no doubt about that. This kind of a to and fro in terms of threats will continue, because Russia has to also show optically has to convey to the rest of the world that it is concerned. Otherwise, as a big power, Russia is hardly to be taken seriously. It can also quote the example in Ukraine. I mean, the Americans will probably quote the Russians in Ukraine that you have fought this war for the better part of the last, 4 years now, almost 3.5 years now. So, or more, in fact, 4 years now. So what about that? That was your interest. This is our interest. And we are concerned about it.
Yeah. Okay, fair. I mean, this can be, every country will argue it from its own vantage point. So, Hasni, at this point, India is observing. The Prime Minister spoke with the leaders of Oman and Kuwait, if I'm not wrong, in the last couple of days, has expressed concern. The statements have been extremely guarded, but of course there's a lot of attention on the fact that Prime Minister Modi was in Israel just a couple of days before these strikes were launched. The opposition is joining the dots on that, making all manners of allegation over how India seems to be in Israel's camp instead of being strictly neutral. How do you see India's options here in terms of where we might position our response?
Well, in fact, Barkha, Prime Minister Modi and External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar have both spoken to most of the leaders of the Gulf over the past few days. Mr. Jaishankar also spoke to his Iranian counterpart just after the strikes. So India is keeping that scenario where it reaches out to everybody in the region. There's been a second statement issued about an hour or so ago by the MEA, essentially turning what it called deep concern now to grave anxiety. Where what you spoke about, the idea of India taking a side has come out, is essentially for three reasons. One, Prime Minister Modi chose to go to Israel at a time when everyone had predicted that a strike on Iran was imminent. Now, the choice to go to Israel is something, he's been before. Israel is a friendly country. But to go at such a timing and then to have the strikes on Iran just a day or two after he leaves gives the impression that either India knew that the strikes were just about to happen and went anyway, discussed it, was briefed by Prime Minister Netanyahu, but we don't have any official confirmation of this. Or on the other hand, you give the impression that you didn't know and in a sense were used as a cover by the Israeli government in order to make it seem as if there was no attack coming and then to strike on Iran. Either way, whether it is crudely put complicity or incompetence, that's not a great look for the government. So I think that's one of the reasons for the criticism. I think the second has been that while Prime Minister Modi has spoken to every one of these leaders, he has not reached out to President Pezeshkian there in Iran. I'm not sure whether that is just because the president must be underground at present, and although he is issuing statements and supposed to be commanding the situation, maybe he's unavailable. That's one part of it. The second has really centered on the fact, and there can be two views on this, but it's centered on the fact that India has not so far condoled or condemned the killing of a sitting head of state, or in a sense, the head of a country. In a sense, the Iran supreme leader, Khamenei, Ali Khamenei, and his family, in what is clearly a violation of Iran's territorial sovereignty. So the fact that India has not condoled with the Iranian government in any of its public statements, or spoken about that, or in fact spoken about the killing of schoolgirls in a school. There are 150 deaths in that girls' school. Many of them were students, or the attacks on hospitals, including the Gandhi hospital there in Tehran. These are things the UN has spoken about. And the fact that India has not said anything, that's also come in for some criticism. But these are tough times, and this is a time where the situation is evolving. I think the government has its hands full just trying to keep on top of what happens to Indians in the region, and will deal with the geopolitical repercussions when it does. But that does not suggest that the government either planned in advance for this kind of event, or that it has some way of, or levers to enforce any kind of control over it.
I do want responses from both Ambassador Suri and General Hassain to the points made by Suhasini, but also the point about the safety of Indians is a very important point. The Hindustan Times reporting in the last 30 minutes that 3 Indians have now died. They've been pulled into this conflict. Ambassador Suri, this is not a region. It's not our war, but it's a part of the world where there are many, many, many Indians with connections, Indians who work, Indians with relatives there. So this is actually closer home than, let's say, Russia, Ukraine. And to that extent, there is great anxiety, as the MEA called it today. Do you agree with Suhasini that there should have been a more public criticism when Khamenei was killed, that this is the violation of the sovereignty of Iran? Or would that be very atypical of how MEA and diplomats are trained to respond?
No, I think I would agree with Shasti that over the last 5 years or so, you can see that we've progressively tilted closer and closer towards the Israeli positions. We first saw it in some of the abstentions on Gaza, which were surprising on their own. And now we are seeing this current situation. And I think for me, the worrisome thing is we do have some leverage, if not a whole lot. Have we tried to use that to dissuade, say, Israel, that this is not the course of action that's going to be helpful to our interests in India? And let me just outline our vital interests, which are almost, I would say, unparalleled anywhere else outside India. We have 9 million Indians in the Gulf. Yeah. And they range from the blue-collar workers to the billionaires and the CEOs. You have $46 billion of remittances coming annually from the Gulf that sustain millions of families in India. 55% of our oil, a lot of our LNG comes from Qatar. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for any duration of time beyond a week, 10 days, we will start feeling the pinch. Every dollar increase in the last 5 days, oil prices have gone up from $60, $65 to $82 today, and threatening to rise further. Every dollar increase in the price of oil adds $2 billion to our annual import bill. Right? If it's $20 up, it's $40 billion in real money that adds to pressures on India. If LNG from Qatar remains off for any large duration of time, apart from the prices, it impacts fertilizer industry. Our fertilizer prices will go up because it's such a crucial feedstock for our fertilizer sector. So we have very, very real interest. And for me, I think it's important that while we know that Israel has been a very valuable military ally for us in terms of hardware and intelligence and everything else, but here its actions are impacting our interests adversely. And I just hope that we do have those candid conversations with the Israelis that, look, this might be your game, it isn't ours.
General Hussain, how do you see it? And also looked at this from a military point of view. I mean, clearly what Iran is doing is what veterans like yourself would recognize to be asymmetric warfare. Countries don't have to have equal capacity to be able to inflict grave damage, especially on civilian populations in adversarial countries. Do you believe that the tilt to Israel, as Ambassador Suri and Suhasini seem to believe, one, that there is a tilt to it is now militating against Indian interests? And let me also just pick up a question from our live stream right now. Prasad says, given the constraints and limitations of Iran, they have cleverly used their neighbors as soft targets to try and push the Americans towards a diplomatic solution. How will Israel react? Is it time to say that Israel and America may not react in identical ways at some point? Their positions may have to diverge, especially with sections of the MAGA base not very happy with what Trump has done.
Yes, diversity of interest. There's no doubt. Almost from the second or the third day, it was becoming quite obvious when we started getting the MAGA inputs that people in America are not obviously in sync with what the Israeli interests could be perceived as. That is going to be a pressure point on the US administration, no doubt. But also coming back to the whole aspect of asymmetric warfare, before I come down to India's stance, just remember one thing that you have to factor in here is that among the IRGC's various weaponries in asymmetry, missiles, rockets, etc., but proxies. Proxies is the main thing. And today you're finding people from around the world, a lot of Shias, and may I say even a lot of non-Shias, who are volunteering, willing to go fight for Iran and things like that. The Shia community is very, very passionate, as we all know it. Sacrifice is a element with which it lives all the time. In fact, worship is almost in the form of sacrifice. That is the most important thing for them. So this is something that Iran will dwell upon and probably exploit if this has to be a long-term war. And therefore, we will see much more turbulence around the Gulf capitals, because those are the areas where the targets will be. It's not all the targets can't be in Israel. It will be many of these will be in the areas of where the American interests also are. Having said that, the CCS day before yesterday night, I think, sat at night, 9:30 at night. It must have done a thorough review of the entire situation. All the inputs must have been taken. Every option must have been considered. I think at this stage, the possible thing that the government is considering is that it is not in our interest at the moment to make any statements, perhaps. They are waiting for the situation to get a little clearer, to passions to die down. Otherwise, what you're seeing on television all the time is Mr. Trump making very strong speeches and things of that nature. Those don't go down well. So at this time, it is better perhaps to keep quiet and wait maybe the next 48 hours or so, after which we can use the leverage of our good relationship with Israel subsequently. That's the way I would read it, because I don't think the Indian government is going to start taking sides at all, or anything which will be perceived as taking sides. I mean, the moment you start doing large-scale condemnation and things like that, I know those are all human aspects which you are looking at, compassionate aspects you are looking at. But in geopolitics, these things are all taken as optics. So I think the Indian government is going to wait at least the next 48 hours.
Go ahead, Suhasini.
Muted.
I can't hear Suhasini. Are you also muted, Suhasini? I'm so sorry. Yeah. Suhasini, go ahead.
This is about...
Yeah, you're okay now.
General Hasnan spoke right now about the fact that condemnations are something that are, matter of emotions. But I just want to very quickly say that in 2020, when the US ordered a strike on Qasem Soleimani, India did actually issue a statement recognizing the killing of a senior Iranian leader. In 2025, again, even though India was criticized for not initially joining the SCO statement that condemned Israel and the US's strikes on Iranian targets, India joined those statements, SCO and BRICS, later in the year. Prime Minister Modi picked up the phone, called President Pezeshkian within hours of the US strikes on nuclear facilities. So the idea that India has not done this in the past, I just wanted to make the point that in the last few years alone, India has in fact condemned, because in this case as well, it is very clear that the first strikes were by the joint US-Israel operations. The killing of Khamenei is part of is the first strike in a sense, and India has always recognized that.
To that extent, what would you have expected India to say at this point, which would not have looked like taking a side in a war where, I'm just arguing this from the other side to try and elicit a deeper thought from you on this. If there are 9 million Indians, there are their safety at stake. Maybe that's where the priority is. Maybe you don't want to be pulled into this spat, a little bit like Russia, Ukraine, for example. How would you respond to that?
I think just by India's own reactions in the past, when it was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, India stayed away. India abstained from all the votes, but also Prime Minister Modi didn't travel to Russia. He skipped a couple of the summits that should have been held. He only went there in 2024. And did make his statements. In this case, I think the first question should have been to his own advisors about whether India knew how close the strikes on Iran were and why the prime minister was allowed to put himself in such an awkward and embarrassing position, going to Israel, standing in the Knesset and saying India stands firmly with Israel in conviction, in the moment and beyond. These are very, very strong. If you're asking the question, is India taking a side? I think India took a side when that statement was made. It is true that since then, there has been a little bit of explanation. The foreign secretary spoke about the prime minister's commitment in terms of Palestine and the humanitarian situation. But I think that's the first place I would say that in the midst of a war for the government to have the prime minister of India, who has, as you said, these immense stakes in that region, nearly a crore, 10 million Indians across the Gulf, the trade with the region, the energy from that region, fertilizer, as Ambassador Suri pointed out, as well as all these very, very carefully calibrated balances. After all, every part of that region is at war with the other at some point or the other. And yet India has maintained historically an ability to deal with the Saudis and the Iranians, to deal with the UAE, as well as the Saudis and with the Qataris. And each of these relations have been kept. So to make an exception in the way that the Prime Minister did for a standalone visit to Israel has to be rethought. I don't see that rethink or the questioning of the government over there as a question, of whether you are for or against the wider policy in the region. It's just about making this point at this particular time. Did they know or did they not know? And if they didn't know, that's worse. If they did know, then the question is, why
didn't everybody know in a general sense that this war was
exactly,
in a very general sense?
Even the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who was supposed to visit Israel last week, put off his visit. I'm just making that point. The second thing you asked, what kind of statement could have been put out? I think India has to deal with the war, the original strikes, as well as the repercussions and the retaliatory strikes, and deal with it in that manner. If at first it seems as if two countries have unilaterally invaded a country with missile strikes, killed their leader, then there has to be a response to that. And then you move on to say everybody must
Okay.
exercise restraint. This is what India did just last year.
Ajay Hussain, you were wanting to respond. Go ahead, sir.
To make an observation that when a build-up of this nature takes place, yes, 19 warships were building up into the Gulf region, etc., and lots of air power was being built up. A lot of people, even me included in that, felt this is all a part of intimidation. And this is screwing, tightening the screw one turn by the next turn. And this happens. This has happened several times before also. And when you set up these kind of visits, they are set up some months ago. You can't start calibrating those visits at that time and say, okay, make it 48 hours later or make it 3 months later, etc. So I think the indications to the Indian government were not very, very clear at this time. There are a lot of us who were making this prediction that this is just calibration and war is not coming. Exactly. There could be some strikes. There could be some. War is of all different kinds. Who knew that you're going to have thousands of strikes taking place and 750 people are going to die immediately? All this could have been just a lot of optics. So because of that, you put off a full visit to a major strategic partner such as Israel. I think is a little beyond.
Okay, let me give the closing word to Ambassador Suri. What next? Do you go with Medvedev's sort of rhetoric on a World War III? Do you believe, very odd statement today from Marco Rubio asking Americans to leave West Asia by commercial flights? I mean, it is bizarre. The Americans at this point look like they don't actually know what to do next. That's a very layperson's interpretation. Having started this conflict, they don't actually know how to backpedal. Do you believe that there could be a back channeling? You could see this reaching the negotiating table again, or does that make Trump look Trump? Actually, there are no good options for Trump here unless he can actually ensure regime change. If he goes to the table without having done regime change, he looks weak. If he continues to drag America in a war that Americans don't support, he looks weak, and he has midterms coming.
So, Barkha, that's a lot to cover, but three quick points. One, I think the Russian statement should be taken as posturing. I don't see them getting involved in the war in a kinetic sense at this point of time. They'd be quite happy to see the Americans exhaust themselves over here.
Yeah.
The second point, even more than the American warning of to citizens to leave from 14 countries, is this remarkable post that Mark Huckabee, the US ambassador in Israel, has put out, telling the tens of thousands of Americans or dual citizens to basically get on a tourist bus and go across the Gulf of Aqaba to Taba, and then go right around the Sinai, under the Suez Canal to Cairo, and then try to get a flight out of there. I don't think we could get away with a statement like that with regard to our citizens. But the third and more substantive point is that, and that's the sad part, that, I don't see easy exit options, because now the Americans and the Israelis have done this twice. That in the middle of negotiations, when the negotiations appeared on the brink of success, when you look at Badr al-Busaidi's statement from Oman to the CBS saying we are a hairbreadth away from the deal, who would take negotiations seriously? If you were an Iranian and you'd been bombed twice in the final stages of negotiations, you would say, am I an idiot to believe you for the third time?
No, that's fair. But what are Iran's options? Iran also can't sustain this indefinitely.
No, I think Iran's choice, not an option, but Iran's choice at this point of time seems to be to inflict maximum pain. Not just on Americans, but on American allies, on the global economy, to make the world feel the pinch that, this has been unfair. Iran has been wronged. And there's a price to be paid, and let everybody pay the price. If it is through the blockage of Hormuz, so be it. And Iranians may have a higher threshold to accept pain than others do. The $4 gas at the gas station, as the Americans like to say at the time of the midterms, can swing elections, right? So Iranians may demonstrate that, what's the worst that you can do to us? And if regime change is the stated goal now, and Rubio has done that, Netanyahu has said this is what we wanted to do for 40 years, then where's the exit from this?
So are we looking at a prolonged war?
I think, yes, we could be looking at a prolonged conflict. We could be looking at serious destruction in Iran, but we could also be looking at serious damage to the global economy. And India will not remain insulated from that.
Well, it seems like a right royal mess is the only way that I would put it. There are people who've been talking about a 7-day window. Could this, not resolve, but at least pause in 7 days? And Ambassador Suri, you certainly seem to think that the exit strategy is not clear at all. The off-ramp is not available at all at the moment. We leave it there. Thank you very much, General Hassan, Suhasini Haidar, and Ambassador Suri. Learned a lot listening to all three of you, and hope to connect with you again soon. A grim time, a turbulent time, not just for the Gulf, but Indian interests and Indian lives and the global economy, and therefore the Indian economy, not unimpacted at all by all of these developments. Thank you very much. And to our audience, thank you, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.